Sunday, November 22nd, 1987. 9:14 p.m., Chicago, Illinois. Families across the city were settling into their evening routines. Televisions were on. Living rooms were lit by the glow of the screen. Earlier that day, the Bears had beaten the Lions, and now sportscaster Dan Roan was calmly delivering the highlights on WGN-TV's 9 o'clock news. It was a completely normal Sunday night broadcast, until, without warning, the screen went black. No warning, no transition, just sudden darkness. 15 seconds of dead air followed, long enough for viewers to wonder if their TV had malfunctioned, long enough for confusion to set in. Then, emerging from the static, something appeared. A figure wearing a rubber Max Headroom mask swayed erratically in front of a rotating corrugated metal background. The image was unstable, distorted. There was no clear audio, only a harsh buzzing sound that cut through the silence. The figure bobbed, twitched, and moved unnaturally. The movements were exaggerated, almost mocking. The image lasted for 22 seconds, then it vanished. WGN engineers managed to cut the signal and restore the broadcast. Dan Roan reappeared on screen, visibly confused, trying to maintain composure. "Well, if you're wondering what's happened," he said with a nervous laugh, "so am I." He had no idea that this was only the beginning. 2 hours later, it happened again. This time on PBS station WTTW. This time for 90 seconds. And this time, there was audio. Garbled, distorted, nonsensical. Audio that would become some of the most analyzed footage in television history. Someone had hijacked 2 major television stations in America's third largest city. They had executed one of the most technically sophisticated broadcast intrusions ever attempted. And to this day, more than 3 decades later, no one knows who they were or how they really did it. This is the story of the Max Headroom incident, the greatest unsolved mystery in television broadcast history. To understand why this incident was so unsettling, you need to understand who Max Headroom was in 1987. Max Headroom existed at the intersection of satire, technology, and corporate culture. He was presented as the world's first computer-generated television host, a glitchy, stuttering artificial intelligence trapped inside the television itself. The character originated in a British dystopian television movie titled Max Headroom, 20 minutes into the future. It depicted a near-future society where television networks controlled everything, and people were literally addicted to screens. Although Max Headroom appeared to be computer-generated, he was actually played by Canadian actor Matt Frewer, wearing heavy prosthetic makeup. The illusion was convincing enough that many viewers believed he truly was digital. He looked exactly like what people in the late 1980s imagined artificial intelligence might look like: fragmented, unstable, caught somewhere between human and machine. By 1987, Max Headroom had become a pop culture phenomenon. He had his own television show on ABC. He became the spokesperson for Coca-Cola's Catch the Wave advertising campaign. His face appeared everywhere: magazines, billboards, promotional materials. He represented the cutting edge of 1980s culture: ironic, media-savvy, technologically sophisticated. But Max Headroom was also inherently subversive. The character existed to mock corporate media, advertising culture, and the growing power of television networks. He criticized the very system that broadcast him. So when someone chose to hijack Chicago television while wearing a Max Headroom mask, it wasn't a random prank. It was a statement, a commentary on media, on control, on who really owns the airwaves. They became the thing they were imitating, a glitch in the system, an intrusion into controlled space, a message that wasn't supposed to exist, but did anyway. The question was simple and terrifying. Who understood this well enough to pull it off? The first intrusion happened at 9:14 p.m. on WGN TV. Dan Roan was in the middle of delivering sports highlights, calm and experienced in front of the camera, doing what he had done hundreds of times before. The broadcast signal was being sent from WGN's studio to their transmitter atop the John Hancock Center, one of Chicago's tallest buildings, and from there across the metropolitan area. Suddenly, without warning, the WGN signal was overpowered. Somewhere, someone was transmitting a stronger signal on the same frequency. Engineers call this the capture effect, when a stronger signal captures a receiver, overriding the original transmission. For viewers at home, the picture went black, then came static, and then the figure in the Max Headroom mask appeared. The video was poor quality, deliberately so. The mask, a commercially available novelty item, covered the performer's face, and dark sunglasses hid their eyes. Behind them, a corrugated metal panel rotated slowly back and forth, an attempt to mimic the geometric, glitchy background associated with Max Headroom. The figure swayed, bobbed, and twitched in a way that was both comical and deeply unsettling. There was no coherent speech, only a loud buzzing noise, distorted and unnatural. It lasted 22 seconds. At WGN's broadcast facility, engineers scrambled. Their standard procedure for a signal intrusion was to change the frequency of the studio to transmitter link. They did so, and the intrusion ended. Dan Roan returned on screen, bewildered. "Well, if you're wondering what's happened," he said, laughing nervously, "the computer running our news must have taken off and gone wild." He had no idea how right and how wrong he was. 2 hours later, the second intrusion occurred at WTTW, the PBS station. Viewers who had seen the WGN incident likely recognized what was happening. But this time, WTTW's transmission facility was minimally staffed. The hijackers had all the time they needed. The broadcast lasted 90 seconds. 90 seconds that would be analyzed and dissected for decades. The same figure appeared. Max Headroom mask, sunglasses, rotating corrugated metal background. But this time, the quality was slightly better, and most importantly, there was audio. The sound was distorted, processed to make it artificial, robotic, and unsettling. But it was understandable. The figure spoke in a bizarre, stream of consciousness style. It mixed pop culture references, local jokes, and nonsensical phrases in a way that confounded viewers. The broadcast began with, "He's a frickin' nerd." No one knew who he was. "Yeah, I think I'm better than Chuck Swirsky. Fucking liberal." Chuck Swirsky was a popular Chicago sportscaster. Why mention him? Was it personal? A grudge? The figure giggled, a high-pitched, unnerving laugh. "Oh, Jesus!" came moans and giggles. They held up a Pepsi can and shouted, "Catch the wave!" This was a Coca-Cola slogan. The hijacker deliberately mixed brands, creating absurd confusion. "Your love is fading," perhaps a reference to the song by The Temptations, though the connection remained obscure. They hummed the theme to Clutch Cargo, a 1960s cartoon famous for its unsettling mouth animation technique. "I stole CBS," a reference to broadcasting, though the meaning remained a mystery. They picked up a rubber glove. "Oh, I just made a giant masterpiece for all the greatest world newspaper nerds. My brother is wearing the other one. But it's dirty." A female figure appears behind, wielding a fly swatter, spanking the masked figure. The scene grows chaotic. "They're coming to get me!" Exaggerated moans, screeches, and distorted audio continue until suddenly the broadcast cuts. Doctor Who resumes. The fourth Doctor remains oblivious to the chaos that just played out across Chicago. After the technical questions came the investigation. Almost immediately, both the FCC and the FBI launched formal inquiries. Hijacking a broadcast signal was a serious federal crime, punishable by heavy fines and potential prison time. This wasn't treated as a joke. Authorities took it very seriously, and yet the investigation went nowhere. Despite interviews, technical analysis, and multiple leads, no one was ever identified. The first major obstacle was evidence. There was almost none. Investigators had the video itself, about 90 seconds of strange, unsettling footage. They analyzed it frame by frame, looking for anything that could point to a person, a location, or a specific piece of equipment. The corrugated metal background appeared to be a simple sheet of metal or cardboard, possibly something pulled from industrial scrap or a shipping container. The Max Headroom mask was commercially available and widely sold at the time. The props, a Pepsi can, a rubber glove, a fly swatter, were completely generic, nothing unique, nothing traceable. The audio distortion could have been produced with a variety of commonly available audio processors. The video quality suggested consumer-grade recording equipment, not professional studio gear. None of it led anywhere. Then there was the problem of technical expertise. In 1987, the pool of people capable of doing something like this was relatively small. Broadcast engineers, radio technicians, ham radio operators, phone phreakers, early computer hackers. These were niche communities, and many of them overlapped, but they were also tight-knit communities. If someone had pulled off the most audacious broadcast hijacking in American history, you'd expect rumors, bragging, stories whispered at meetups or passed along quietly. But nothing surfaced. That silence led investigators to a few uncomfortable possibilities. Either the people responsible were incredibly disciplined and never spoke about it, or they operated completely outside the usual technical circles, or they were so deeply embedded within those circles that they blended in perfectly, hiding in plain sight. Then there was the biggest mystery of all. Motive. There were no demands, no political message, no manifesto, no ransom, no threats. This wasn't terrorism. It wasn't straightforward vandalism either. Too much planning, too much risk, too much technical effort for random destruction. And it clearly wasn't about money. So what was it? A prank? A piece of performance art? A commentary on media control? Pure chaos created for its own sake. The lack of a clear motive made identifying suspects almost impossible. Without knowing why someone did it, it's hard to determine who would even want to. And then there was the clock. The statute of limitations for broadcast signal intrusion eventually expired. Years passed, decades passed. Legally, anyone involved could now come forward without facing criminal prosecution. And still, no one did. That silence raised even more questions. Were the perpetrators dead? Were they afraid of civil lawsuits, professional consequences, or personal embarrassment? Were they protecting someone else? Or did they simply enjoy the mystery too much to ever end it? The longer the silence lasted, the more unsettling it became, because at some point, not talking became the strangest part of the entire story. Over the years, countless theories have emerged about who was behind the Max Headroom incident. Some are grounded in technical logic, others drift into speculation. None have ever been proven. One of the most common ideas is the disgruntled employee theory. The idea is simple. someone who worked for WGN or WTTW, or had worked there in the past, had the inside knowledge needed to pull this off. They would understand transmission schedules, vulnerabilities, and technical specifications. They might also have a personal grievance. There are details that seem to support this theory. The hijackers specifically targeted Chicago stations. They referenced Chuck Swirsky, a local sportscaster known in the broadcasting community. They demonstrated technical knowledge consistent with professional experience. And the line, "I stole CBS," could be interpreted as an inside joke or an industry reference. But there are problems with this explanation. If it were a disgruntled employee, you might expect a clearer message, some kind of statement, some expression of anger or motive. Instead, the broadcast was chaotic, absurd, and deliberately confusing. There's also the risk factor. A station employee would be among the first people investigated. The chances of being identified would be extremely high. And despite extensive scrutiny, no current or former employees were ever seriously implicated. Another popular theory points to hacker culture. In the mid to late 1980s, hacker culture was beginning to flourish. Phone phreaking had existed for years. Early computer hacking was becoming more common. Chicago had an active underground tech scene filled with people eager to test boundaries. Perhaps a group of hackers decided to aim for the ultimate target, television itself. This theory makes sense in several ways. The technical sophistication fits. The prank-like nature of the content fits. The subversive use of Max Headroom fits perfectly with hacker ideology. And the culture of one-upmanship within hacker communities could explain the ambition of the act. But there are issues here too. Hackers usually want credit. Reputation matters. Achievements are currency. Yet no one ever credibly claimed responsibility. And broadcast signal intrusion requires a different skill set than most hackers of the era possessed. This wasn't just code. It was radio frequency engineering, hardware, and logistics. Despite decades of speculation, no one from Chicago's hacker scene has ever been conclusively linked to the incident. Then there's the theory that the entire thing was an art project. Some argue that the Max Headroom intrusion was performance art, a commentary on corporate media, advertising, and control. The symbolism is compelling. Max Headroom was a character designed to mock television culture. Hijacking real television using that character creates a perfect loop of irony. The Pepsi compared with a Coca-Cola slogan. The nonsense dialogue disrupting structured programming. The absurd, almost grotesque imagery breaking into a trusted medium. All of it could be read as intentional satire. But critics of this theory point out some problems. Artists usually want recognition, eventually. Even anonymous artists tend to leave interpretive clues. And the crude humor, especially the spanking scene, doesn't align well with most serious conceptual art traditions. If it was art, it was unusually juvenile, even for avant-garde standards. Another theory emerged decades later and briefly reignited the mystery. In 2010, a Reddit user using the name Bowie posted a long, detailed account claiming he knew who was responsible. According to him, the incident was carried out by two brothers, referred to only as J and K, who were part of Chicago's video production scene in the 1980s. Bowie claimed he had known them personally. He said he had seen equipment in their home that could have been used in the hijacking. He also claimed they referenced the incident in ways that suggested inside knowledge. The post generated massive attention. Internet sleuths began investigating Chicago video production circles from the era, attempting to identify J and K. Names circulated quietly, though none were ever proven. Then, Unexpectedly, Bowie updated his post. He said new evidence convinced him the brothers were not responsible. He refused to share what that evidence was. He declined interviews. Eventually, he stopped engaging entirely. Why the sudden reversal? Did he receive legal threats? Did someone convince him he was wrong? Was the original story fabricated? No one knows. And that uncertainty only added another layer to the mystery. Some theories go even further into darker territory. One of the most unsettling ideas is that the investigation failed not because the perpetrators were clever, but because someone didn't want it to succeed. The cover-up theory suggests that the Max Headroom incident involved people with connections powerful enough to make the problem quietly disappear. What if the hijackers had ties to government agencies, military contractors, or intelligence organizations? What if the intrusion wasn't a prank at all, but a test, an experiment to measure vulnerabilities in broadcast infrastructure? If that were the case, revealing who was responsible would expose serious weaknesses in national communication systems. It would be embarrassing, possibly dangerous. There's no concrete evidence to support this theory, but it persists for one reason. The FBI and the FCC had real resources. They took the incident seriously. And yet, after 2 intrusions in one of America's largest cities, they came up with nothing. No arrests, no named suspects, no public resolution. That feels unusual, unless the truth was inconvenient. Another possibility is that the incident was never meant to be understood. What if the goal wasn't to send a message, but to prove a point? That the system could be broken, that order was fragile, that control was an illusion. That idea ties directly into the cultural impact of the incident. The Max Headroom hijacking didn't just fade away, it embedded itself in popular culture. Television shows and films began referencing it, directly or indirectly. Stories about corrupted broadcasts, sinister messages hidden in television signals, and screens turning against their viewers became common. Shows like The X-Files explored similar themes, suggesting that television could be a conduit for manipulation and control. Films like The Ring and Pulse leaned into the idea that something dangerous could travel through video itself. Later, Black Mirror would repeatedly return to the same core anxiety. Technology that feels familiar suddenly behaving in disturbing, unpredictable ways. Even Stranger Things, with its obsession with 1980s media culture, echoed the aesthetic and unease of the era that made the Max Headroom incident possible. Online, the mystery took on a second life. When internet forums and platforms like Reddit emerged, the Max Headroom incident became a template for digital mystery solving. People analyzed every frame, every word, every background detail. Entire communities formed around the idea that if they just looked closely enough, the truth would reveal itself. But it never did. In hacker culture, the incident became legendary. It represented ultimate access, the ability to hijack the most controlled, most public medium in existence, even if only for 90 seconds. And there was something bittersweet about it. The transition from analog to digital broadcasting, completed in the United States in 2009, made this kind of intrusion essentially impossible. You can't overpower a digital signal the way you could capture an analog one. That means the Max Headroom hack wasn't just unsolved. It was unrepeatable. It belonged to a specific moment in technological history, one that no longer exists. Academically, the incident found a place in media studies. Professors used it as an example of how fragile control systems really are, how media functions as power, how corporate imagery can be subverted, how technology invites misuse alongside innovation. Artists too drew inspiration from it, exploring themes of identity, anonymity, and the uncanny. But perhaps the most enduring impact was psychological. There was something deeply unsettling about what happened that night. Television in 1987 was trusted. It entered people's homes. Families gathered around it. There was an unspoken agreement that what appeared on screen belonged there. The Max Headroom incident broke that agreement. Something appeared that wasn't supposed to. Something chaotic. Something wrong. For many viewers, especially children, it was genuinely frightening. Your television, your safe, predictable appliance, had betrayed you. The Max Headroom character already lived in what psychologists call the uncanny valley, almost human, but not quite. Familiar, yet deeply uncomfortable. Seeing that distorted face interrupt real programming amplified the effect. It wasn't just strange, it felt invasive. And maybe that was the point. Decades later, the mystery refused to die. Every few years, the Max Headroom hijacking resurfaces. On anniversaries, in documentaries, in late-night conversations online. Each time, the same questions are asked. Again, and the same silence answers back. With the rise of YouTube, a new generation discovered the footage. People who weren't alive in 1987 watched it for the first time, often without context, and many had the same reaction: confusion, discomfort, unease. Some assumed it was a creepypasta. Others thought it was a hoax created later and retroactively inserted into television history. But it was real. Archived broadcasts confirmed it. News reports from the time confirmed it. FCC records confirmed it. And that only made it more disturbing. Online communities took the investigation further than ever before. Reddit threads stretched for thousands of comments. Amateur investigators attempted to recreate the signal intrusion using period-accurate equipment. Engineers explained, in painstaking detail, how the hijack could have been done. Theories were mapped out like flowcharts. If the hijackers used a microwave transmitter, they would need line-of-sight access to the broadcast antenna. If they used a relay attack, they would need access to a secondary transmission point. If they were insiders, they would need credentials or help from someone who had them. Every possibility led to another dead end. Some people believed the answer had already been given, hidden in plain sight. They argued that the hijackers wanted anonymity above all else, and that the mystery itself was the final message. A reminder that not everything can be traced, cataloged, or solved. Occasionally, claims of responsibility surfaced. Anonymous posts, deleted videos, vague confessions that never provided verifiable details. One person claimed involvement but couldn't explain the technical method accurately. Another described the equipment but got basic facts wrong. Every supposed confession fell apart under scrutiny. And then there were the near confessions. People who hinted that they knew who did it, or that they were adjacent to the event. People who spoke in riddles, half-statements, jokes layered with plausibility. Nothing solid, nothing provable. As time passed, the possibility of a true answer grew smaller. Memories faded. Equipment was discarded. Locations changed. People moved on or passed away. The window for certainty slowly closed. And yet, the story still matters, not because of who did it, but because of what it revealed. The Max Headroom hijacking exposed the vulnerability of systems we assume are secure. It showed how easily authority can be interrupted, how fragile trust really is. It reminded people that technology reflects the people who use it, for better or worse. And maybe that's why the mystery endures. Because it happened at the exact moment when media felt powerful, centralized, and unquestionable. And for 90 seconds, that power was taken away. No explanation was given. No apology followed. The screen went dark. Normal programming resumed, but something had changed. The hijackers were never caught. Their identities were never confirmed. Their motive was never proven. All that remains is the footage, a distorted face, a broken signal, and a reminder that sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones that never give us closure.